You trusted your doctor. You trusted your lab results. Now imagine those results were wrong, and nobody in charge thought to check. In this video, you will learn how a company that raised $945 million from some of the most powerful people in America managed to build a product that, according to federal regulators and subsequent court findings, never worked as promised. You will learn why the board of directors, decorated with generals, former secretaries of state, and cabinet members, asked almost no questions. And you will learn what that silence cost real patients who received real medical results from a machine that investigators later concluded could not reliably produce them. This is not ancient history. It is a documented case study in how prestige can substitute for scrutiny, and how fear of missing out can silence the instinct to ask a single difficult question. Elizabeth Holmes founded Theranos in 2003. She was 19 years old and had just dropped out of Stanford University. Her idea was genuinely compelling. A device she called the Edison would run 240 different blood tests from a single drop of blood taken by a finger prick. No needles, no laboratories, near-instant results. For patients with chronic illnesses, for elderly people who feared needles, for anyone who had ever waited days for results that determined their treatment, it sounded like a revolution. By 2014, that idea had become a $9 billion valuation. Holmes appeared on magazine covers. She was compared to Steve Jobs. She wore his uniform, the black turtleneck, and she spoke in the same register of visionary certainty. Walgreens and Safeway signed partnership agreements. Theranos wellness centers opened across Arizona and California. Patients walked in, gave a drop of blood, and walked out believing they had received the future of medicine. What they had actually received, according to the findings of federal investigators and evidence presented at trial, was something very different. The Edison device, the centerpiece of the entire enterprise, performed reliably on fewer than 12 of the 240 tests it claimed to offer. For the majority of tests, Theranos was secretly running samples on third-party Siemens machines hidden inside its own laboratories, standard commercial equipment available to any hospital. The revolutionary device was, in significant part, a demonstration model, and the results it did produce raised serious accuracy questions. $945 million raised, fewer than 12 tests reliably performed by the device itself. Now look at the board of directors. George Shultz, former Secretary of State; Henry Kissinger, former Secretary of State; James Mattis, retired four-star general, later Secretary of Defense; William Perry, former Secretary of Defense. These were not passive names on a letterhead. They were active participants in a board that collectively held over $400 million in paper value in Theranos stock. They lent the company their credibility in investor presentations and government meetings. And according to accounts published in John Carreyrou's extensively sourced investigative reporting in the Wall Street Journal, they asked almost no technical questions about the core product. Not one of them had a background in medicine, biology, or laboratory science. That is not a coincidence to be noted and moved past. That is the mechanism. Holmes reportedly controlled access to information about the technology carefully. Board members were not given independent technical assessments. Scientists inside the company who raised concerns faced, according to testimony presented at trial, intense pressure to remain silent. And when a young employee named Tyler Schultz, the grandson of board member George Shultz, reported his concerns about test accuracy to the New York State Department of Health in 2014, his own grandfather sided with Holmes. Tyler Schultz was 24 years old. He reported what he believed were serious patient safety issues. His grandfather, one of the most powerful men in American diplomatic history, chose the company over him. That moment contains the entire story. Not because of family drama, but because it illustrates what prestige can do to judgment. George Shultz had every credential that should produce wisdom. He had, according to those who knew him, genuine affection for Holmes. And when his own blood relative brought him a specific, documented concern, the credential structure, the investment, the board position, the belief in the vision, held firmer than the alarm. In 2015, John Carreyrou published his first investigative report in the Wall Street Journal. It raised serious questions about the accuracy of Theranos technology. Holmes went on television and called it a piece of lies. The company's lawyers moved aggressively against sources, but the investigation did not stop. In 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services conducted a laboratory inspection and issued a finding that Theranos labs posed, in their words, immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. The agency revoked Theranos's laboratory certification and moved to ban Holmes personally from operating any clinical laboratory. In 2018, the company dissolved entirely. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services found immediate jeopardy to patient health and safety. The legal reckoning came later. In January 2022, a federal jury convicted Elizabeth Holmes on 4 counts of fraud. She was sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. Her former partner and company president, Ramesh Balwani, known as Sunny, was convicted on 12 counts of fraud and sentenced to nearly 13 years. The patients who received inaccurate results were not abstract. Some received false positives for serious conditions, triggering unnecessary procedures and profound psychological distress. Some received false negatives. The full scope of patient harm has never been completely quantified, which is itself a form of conclusion. Here is what this video is asking you to sit with. Theranos did not succeed in spite of its board. It succeeded in significant part because of it. The presence of generals and statesmen signaled trustworthiness to investors, to regulators, to the public. Prestige functioned as a substitute for due diligence. And no one, not the decorated veterans, not the former cabinet secretaries, not the venture capitalists, apparently asked to see independently verified clinical data before committing hundreds of millions of dollars and their personal reputations to the enterprise. This video presents publicly available information and court-established findings for educational purposes. The convictions described are matters of public record. The regulatory findings of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services are documented in official federal communications. Similarity in governance structure to other cases does not establish wrongdoing in any other company or institution. The fear this story produces should not be directed only at Elizabeth Holmes. It should be directed at the structure that made her possible. Here is the question I keep coming back to. If a board composed of some of the most accomplished people in American public life did not ask the basic questions, what would it actually take for you to trust that someone had?